what your experience was like finding land, leasing land.
It's a better gamble with your money to bet on the operation and the marketing than to lock the capital into the property.
Lots of innovation happening on Jordan's farm. So much so that I think we titled the video "The King of DIY Farming."
The idea that a retired cow is somehow a waste product of the beef industry, that's only because we treat them that way. I would challenge any finishing operation to compare ribeyes. All told, we do about $1 million in revenue a year.
Hey everybody, thanks for joining us on Farmer to Farmer. I'm Tyler Pearson with Heifer USA, and today I'm joined by Jordan Green from J&L Green Farms. If you've seen our farm tour with him on our YouTube channel before, you know that Jordan is an excellent farmer with a lot of advice that is practical that he can share with us. And if you haven't, go check out the video after this is over. But Jordan, thank you so much for joining us. We're really excited to dive deeper. The farm tour was a great success, and really look forward to our conversation today.
Yeah, man. Thanks so much for having me. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. So why don't you just start off by telling our audience just about how did you get started? So you did the apprenticeship program at Polyface Farm. Where did you go from there?
Yeah, so that was 2001 and 2. And, kind of as a teenage boy, there was two things I always wanted to do. One was to ultimately have a career in agriculture, but I also always had this desire to go to the Marine Corps. So me and a buddy ended up going to boot camp together in 2004, and I did a 5-year enlistment to kind of satisfy that that part of myself that always wanted to try that out. Leaving that is when my wife Laura and I we got married while I was in the Marines and came back to Virginia to start what became J&L Green Farm in the summer of 2009. So kind of right in the middle of the great financial crisis. A lot of people said we were stupid to leave secure jobs and go start this farming thing, but it was a dream that we had, a dream that I had, and we were in a position at that point that if you're going to try something where you're pushing all the chips to the center of the table, it was the best time for us to do that. So here we are. What would this be? 16 years later, still doing it. So
Yeah.
Something must have worked out.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. And for those who haven't seen the farm tour, it is definitely working out. You have an amazing farm. I had the privilege of being there. And first of all, I just definitely want to say thank you for your service, Jordan, to the country, for serving in the Marine Corps. We're all very appreciative of what you and Marines and everyone serving in the armed forces do every day.
Oh,
Um,
well, thank you. I like to say thank you for paying your taxes.
Absolutely. The rest of us do our part as we
Uh,
can.
yeah.
Well, tell our audience about the state of your farm today, 16 years later, right? So where are you guys at today? What's the big picture for J&L Green Farm?
It's been a journey along the way of, we started entirely on lease property. 11 years into the process, we bought our first piece of property. We've had enterprises that we ran up to a pretty big scale and then completely collapsed in on themselves and ended it for a plethora of reasons. So no 2 years have looked exactly the same. And that's very different from a lot of the neighbors' farms that we see and farms that I visit across the country that are very, let's say, stagnated into a production cycle or bound to legacy production models that they have to do it this way because granddad spent a bunch of money into XYZ barns or parlors or equipment. So we want to stay very nimble and mobile and light on our feet for the operations of the farm because we are interacting directly with our customers and producing what they want to buy.
Yeah. And what are the staple enterprises for your farm today? In this series, we do definitely try to dive deeper into business practices, what is profitable for you. So tell us about the enterprises that are performing well for you.
So kind of three categories that we operate in are cattle, pork, and poultry. We got out of doing egg layers back in 2015-16. And this is the first year that I've kind of wondered, I wonder if that's something that we should get back into when you see $12 a dozen eggs at the store. But yeah, it just was not a profitable one for most of the years that we were dabbling in it. So,
And what would you say is kind of the rough breakdown in terms of total volume, what percentages?
I think our number one category is pigs because that includes both our piglet sales and our by the cut pork sales. All told, we do about $1 million in revenue a year of direct sales. Pigs is going to be the biggest one. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but let's say 350 to 400,000 a year in pork products. Poultry is going to be our next one. So we're doing about 10,000 broiler chickens a year, about 1,000 turkeys a year. And then beef, I think, is going to be number 3. It might be number 2, though, that we are slaughtering about 60 head of cows a year. And that's the one enterprise that we are constricted on growth. That's what our pastures can handle, plus or minus a few. And it's the most competitive with other farmers for ground to run cattle on. So that's kind of the one I'm focused on right now, is finding areas that we can grow and scale that out, but it's also the most constrictive to work on.
Well, let's dive into those enterprises more here in just a bit, but I want to back up and ask you about, you mentioned that when you got started, you leased land. And that's an option that is interesting to a lot of folks who watch this channel. Can you tell us a little bit about what your experience was like finding land, leasing land, and would you recommend it to somebody who's thinking about getting started?
Yeah, it's something I'm a big proponent of, is starting with leased property. Owning property is kind of a wealth securing tool. That
Right.
if you have a bunch of cash that you don't know what to do with, buying property kind of puts it into a very stable asset for a long period of time. That definitely will keep up with inflation, hopefully exceed inflation in value. But when you're starting a business, usually with a limited amount of capital, keeping that capital available for the operation is what will build the equity and the value of what's being produced. So if we're running, say, $100,000 through a livestock enterprise, every time that capital rotates through the enterprise, hopefully we are collecting a profit margin off of that. So a cow calf through finish operation, basically a 3-year process that it's taking for that initial capital to give that return. Then we start looking at, all right, is there ways that we can accelerate the capital cycle instead of it being 3 years, maybe with something like pigs? It's about a year from when a sow is bred to when those piglets are grown and ready to be processed and sold. So we now have a 1-year rotation on the capital. Okay. Then you look at something like broiler chickens, which could be an 8-week lifespan, maybe 10 to 12 weeks on when you pay for the chicks to when you sell them, and you can rotate that capital now in a 12-week process. If we had taken that initial capital and put it into property, it's now not available to flow through the operation of the farm and generate that profit margin every time it cycles. So for us, starting with a limited amount of capital, we, frankly didn't have the money to buy a piece of property with, but even if we did, it's a better gamble with your money to bet on the operation and the marketing than to lock the capital into the
Yeah.
property.
Yeah. I find that to be true in a variety of businesses, both farms and non-farms, that in the early stages, when you're first getting started, like you said, don't lock your cash flow up into sinking it into assets that aren't generating more cash flow or capital for you. And instead reinvest that as much as possible for as long as possible until you have a great book of business that then you can start looking toward
Right.
purchasing assets.
Yeah, and as a business grows, farm business, especially if it gets to a point where you have the scale of an enterprise where it could cash flow the mortgage on a piece of property, then that's a different discussion to have. You have a proven
Yeah.
marketing outlet, you have a proven enterprise that has a track record of profitability. Then yes, then there's advantages to looking at buying property. When you're leasing, you are working with a landowner, and each one is going to be different in what they're looking for in that relationship, what's important to them with the property. So yeah, you got to manage a relationship as much as you're managing a piece of property. But there's certainly a phase in that startup cycle, if you don't have property, that it's vastly cheaper to manage a relationship than it is to manage a loan officer at the bank who's wanting to know why you're not making your mortgage payment.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think are key in managing your relationship with with the landowner that you're leasing from?
It's definitely communication. You're managing the relationship in a way that there's always an openness to communication. Developing that relationship, just like you would with someone that you want to have a close relationship with, seeing what's important to them, if what you're wanting to do with the property can meet their goals for the property, um, showing them what's happening. It's always easier for the second piece of property than the first, because we just bring them to the first one and be like, this is what we're going to do. And there's been properties that we were in discussions to lease that we ended up not leasing, because just that initial exploration of the relationship did not have the warm and fuzzies.
We see more and more farmers looking at those options. I see a lot of great programs out there, farm link programs that are connecting, landowners to folks who want to get into farming. There's a great list actually that I came across recently from the Young Farmers Coalition that they put together about all the land link programs. And we'll put that in the description for anybody that's looking for land opportunities but having trouble, finding leased land options available to them. Let's get back to the enterprises a little bit. You have some really unique enterprises, I think, on your farm, at least compared to other farms. Um, you guys, like you mentioned, you have a huge farrowing operation. Um, when did you realize, and how did you realize that that was an enterprise worth your time?
That was the first one we really scaled out, was the pig operation of the farrowing. The first year that we started the farm, we were raising pigs to supplement another farm that needed surplus production. So that was kind of helping us get a little bit of scale out the door. And the problem that we had pretty much right away was finding quantity and quality of piglets. And talking with pork producers around the country, most of us have backed our way into a farrowing operation to solve two or three of three problems. So you have quantity, quality, and cost. And sometimes you can find quantity, but the quality is completely garbage, or you can find quality, but the cost is astronomical. And so we kind of backed our way into having this farrowing enterprise just to supply the piglets that we needed. And it turns out plenty of other farms had the same problem that we did, that finding a pastured-based phenotype piglet is largely extinct, on the East Coast. One of the best little farms that we were buying piglets from had 8 sows, and that's all they ever wanted to do, is like a retirement project for them. But really nice pigs, never a problem with them, but they never wanted to do more than 8 sows, and they had other customers, so we were capped there. So that's what got us into doing that. Turned out there was a lot of other farms that wanted piglets as well. That gave us some scale to start building a centerpiece enterprise for the farm. That you have your big pillar that's holding up the tent, and this is where a lot of the focus is and what a lot of the operation is oriented around. That allows us to tuck those fledgling enterprises around it and allow them a little bit more organic growth as we build up our direct to retail marketing, because that just takes time. You can't come out of the gate in a huge way. You have to develop those relationships. But if we can sell a couple hundred piglets a year to this farm, a couple hundred piglets to another farm, maybe 1,000 piglets a year to another place, that gives us a little pop right out the gate and being able to go. But also, there was no competition on the production side. Or the infrastructure side, mainly the land that we're running it on. We're not competing with other farmers for brushy, grown over forests. No one's trying to plant crops there or run cattle there. Subsequently, the market value of that property is pushed down to either like a country residential type of rate, which is like one house on 50 acres, or hunting property. And that became a lot more economical for us to look at, that we're not trying to buy $10,000-$15,000 an acre property to run pigs on. We're buying $2,000 an acre property on the side of a mountain. And guess what? The pigs love it. It's entirely wooded. There's plenty of oak trees. It's a pig paradise. Any other farmer looking at that, they're like, well, that's where I go hunt the whitetails in the fall.
Yeah. So it sounds like a perfect combination of high demand with low barrier to entry, right? You got affordable land that not many other people are looking at utilizing. Got high demand from a potential customer base, so it's a great opportunity. How did you get connected to customers that were looking for pastured piglets?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of almost the same thing as managing the landowners on leased property. The joke about farmers preferring the company of John Deere's and cows to people is kind of true. But if you want opportunities, you have to communicate with potential customers. Now, if you're selling by the cut, that means one particular thing. If you're selling to other farmers, that means going where they are. And I found some of the best customers we've had for piglets was developed by going to farm conferences and just talking about what we do. And then they're like, oh, we're really looking for piglets. How far away are you guys from us? So some of our biggest customers were developed that way. And then the word just kind of gets out. It's so easy now compared to what it was in the 2000s that you can start an Instagram page for your farm, just start taking pictures of pigs and hashtagging them pigs of Instagram or whatever, and people will start finding you, and they'll start asking if it's something that you have available.
Yeah, and talking about social media, leveraging that as a way to build community and to reach, prospective customers. I know that you've been doing that for a long time. I'm Christine Hernandez on our livestock team here at Heifer Ranch. Went to one of your farm builder events at your farm
Yeah.
when she first got started in pastured pig production. So you have an amazing YouTube channel, by the way, with lots of great information, all of what we're talking about and a whole lot more. You guys should check it out. It's called Farm Builder. We're going to put a link down in the description for you so you can see his YouTube channel. How did you leverage social media? Tell us a little bit more about that directly.
The easiest thing to do is just tell your story. That there's people who are looking just to follow a good story, but then there's also people who are looking for how to do something. And especially let's say for us millennials and younger, one of the first places that we'll go, like say something breaks on your car, one of the first things that you're going to do is YouTube how to fix broken air conditioning on 97 Honda or something like that, and there'll be a dozen videos on it. Tailoring that communication to what people are looking for, we found to be important. So, like on the retail side of our farm, that is not as responsive to social media. That is more of an email-driven customer base. But I found from the farmer to farmer crowd, people who are looking how to do pastured pigs or how to process poultry or run a farm business, they are looking for video audio
Yeah.
formats.
Yeah.
And
So YouTube is a great place for
yeah,
for
that's where
that.
YouTube is a great one, and social media is a great place to put that kind of content. Um, Doing it in an evergreen type of way, like one of the biggest videos on the Farm Builder channel is how to eviscerate a chicken. Like it's getting right to the point, and it's showing how it's done precisely, step by step. The camera is looking down on a table, and all you see is my hands and the chicken. And yes, that's one of the biggest videos that's there because it's not beating around the bush and filling in the video with a bunch of fluff of other stuff. It's a direct tutorial that people responded to. And even today, there's a ever growing hunger for that kind of content, and so that's where we're going to try to reach people.
And here we are doing another YouTube video of
There you
just
go.
try to reach those same folks for sure. So YouTube can be a great place to reach other farmers who are trying to learn. Other social media platforms might be a great place to reach your, direct to consumer market. You've talked quite a bit about email, and I know that you rely on email, to do a lot of your direct to consumer sales. Have you built that list over time, and how do you leverage it?
Well, we are wandering really into my wife's part of the business here, which is the customer side. So I'll give my brief overview of it that I'm aware of, and she probably would know more and counteract half of what I'm saying on it. But the main thing is to every time you have a interaction with a potential new customer is to capture that email. Most people are going to scroll through their email and look at what's there and either dump it or read it. And that opportunity there is what we're looking for. So some of them are coming through, let's say Google ads. Some of them are walking in the store. Other ones are Googling grass-fed beef near me, and they find your farm. And in every one of those categories, we are seeking to capture that means to communicate with them. A lot of customers will just forget about you. They're like, our lives are so busy, they're running here and there, and next thing they know, like, oh, it's been 6 months since I've been to J&L Green Farm. We have automated campaigns that are set up through Graze Cart, and Drip is the system that's used there. where you're not overwhelming the customers with email. Like all of us hate getting an email like 3 times a day from the same company, and you're just like, spam folder. But if it's a once a week communication that has some engagement, both on maybe an entertainment side, a little bit of educational side, maybe a little bit of a call to action side, but you're just keeping that contact there, and keeping that pathway for the customer to return to you an order is what we've found to be successful. Like the landowners and the developing relationships with other farmers, developing and maintaining that relationship with the customers is the paramount importance. It's not selling them something right now. It's establishing a relationship with them, educating them along the way and saying, hey, we are here to help you solve this problem. You want to feed your family clean and healthy meats? We can help solve that problem. And we can do it in a way that is very convenient and easy to you. One of our most successful moves in the last couple of years is a subscribe and save feature. So it's not selling a CSA box or like something that we have decided to assemble. It's whatever that customer puts into their shopping cart. It's just automated on a monthly basis. It is like the CSA box tailored specifically to what they like, and just having that convenience of having it automated, we've had really good response to.
So true. I mean, building the relationship and providing value to your audience, so incredibly important. And it sounds like we might have to have your wife on the show next because there's so much practical value, in what you guys are doing there.
Yeah, absolutely. She'd make a great guest for you.
Yeah, I really think so for sure. So let's dig into a couple of your other enterprises real quick. So another unique thing that you guys are doing on the farm is your cattle operation. Tell us a little bit about how that works, how you kind of got to that point, and how it's working for you guys.
Yeah, so going back to what I was saying before about that being our most restricted enterprise because we're grass fed, grass finished, you can manage your pastures and improve them, but there's only that's an incremental improvement year over year. That's not we ordered another 10 tons of feed scenario. The animals that we were grazing that grass or value adding to that forage became the most critical point of that enterprise, that they need to be animals that are going to slaughter because that is the most valuable animal to us, not a cow calf operation. I'm
And
sure
let me ask you what you mean there when you say the most valuable to you. What do you mean exactly?
So going back to what we were talking about with that capital cycle,
Yeah,
how do we have a limited amount of pasture that we're working with. What is the most profitable way to move our capital through an herbivore enterprise to make
yeah,
money from it?
yeah.
Do we
Gotcha.
have a cow calf herd? So we're roughly dealing with about 100 acres of pasture. So if we were doing a cow calf herd, carrying those calves, carrying those replacement heifers, and those stockers and the bulls, just off the top of my head, what would we be producing? Maybe 20 head a year.
Yeah.
That could go to slaughter. If 20 head was all we were selling, then great. That there might be an economic model for that, and I think there certainly is an economic model for having a cow calf through finish, but it's at a lot more than 100 acres. It's somewhere well north of that. So for us, the priority became how can we manage as many cattle as possible in a way that hits the criteria that we're looking for. So we want grass finished beef, which for us, we want to be roughly 1 year in grazing on our property. So, say we were to do a finishing operation, but enter into the equation going through a Bud Williams school. And one of the things he taught was there is always a class of animals at a sale that is the most overvalued class and one that is the most undervalued class. When you have a direct to retail operation, you have an unfair advantage that you always have the overvalued class. That beef going through your freezers and being sold to customers is always the best return on those animals. So then it's looking at, all right, what is the most undervalued class of animals that meets the criteria that we're looking for? Should we buy 700-pound heifers? Should we buy 800-pound bulls or steers or what have you? It's simple math just to start looking at what's selling at the stockyard, what they're selling for, to identify that systemically the most undervalued class of animals is cull cows or pound cows. because there is no further value add that the market can do for them, or that a farmer can do for them, besides them just going to Taco Bell, right? Their production life is basically over. A lot of them do need to go to Taco Bell next week, like they're done. But sitting at the stock sale, just watching these animals go through, it's about maybe 20% that goes through a pound sale that they're cows that still have gas in the tank. Either they're crazy, like you got to watch out for those ones, the ones that are going to go psycho, or there's another reason that they're there. It could be a farm is liquidating. She was one of the 10 cows that jumped on the trailer first, so off to the sale she goes because the taxes got to get paid, whatever. Being bred out of cycle, not breeding, that's a big one as well. So I can buy a 700-800 pound steer at $2.50 a pound right now, maybe $3 a pound depending on where you are, or I can buy a 1,200 pound cow that's somewhere between 5 and 12 years old that's still in good condition. I can buy that 1,200 pound cow for $1.10 a pound. So both class, I'm going to graze on my farm for a year, and I'm going to slaughter and sell through the retail side. But there's a lot of advantages to that pound cow that we've found doing it 6-8 years now that we've been doing it, that I'm completely sold on them. A herd of older cows, they're usually not in a hurry to go anywhere. They're just like, oh, this is the best grass I've had in a decade. I'm not, I love this guy. You bring in a herd of 700-pound heifers, you better get ready to do some running if they're not well trained to electric fence, because they got a lot of giddy up in the tank. There's been a couple reasons that we've continued with it, but it's producing the product that we need, and it's an undervalued class of animals that, again, there's little competition for.
How do you market that to your customers? What are you saying about your product, and how does it fit the gap in the market you've identified?
Yeah, so we're marketing it as grass-finished beef. On our website, we have an explanation of what we do. So we're like, we are not a cow-calf through finish. If you're looking for a farm where you can buy beef and that calf was born there and there's a history of its life all the way through slaughter, that's not what we do. That's not what the vast majority of direct-to-retail beef farms are doing either. They might have some internal production that's cow-calf through finish, but some percentage to a significant percentage of what they are selling are animals brought in from offsite, either directly to slaughter or buying in heavy stockers or light stockers, or some class in between, and then grazing them for a period of time and slaughtering them. If you look at the science of nutrition in grass-fed beef, those beneficial ratios of omega-3s and 6s and different nutrient compositions, that can be gained in the carcass with about 90 days of quality grazing.
Yeah.
I had a good conversation with Alan Williams about this at the Acres conference in December of last year. And he actually thought it was shorter than that, but let's say 90 days. We're doing a full grazing season, so minimum amount of time. The same that we would do if we were buying stockers. That was kind of our initial approach was, well, we were buying in stockers and grazing them, so let's just do it the same as we were before. A side benefit to doing it the way we are is we're running well over a 40% calving rate on these old cows because they're not preg checked when they're sold at the auction. And so we bring them back, and the closest that we've had a calf after buying one was like 3 days later, and the longest was 9 months later. Like she got, the bull tagged her on the way on the trailer. So, we're getting this, kind of bonus on top of these calves that, right now we're just weaning them light, 350, 400 pounds, and just cycling them back through the stock sale. But we certainly could keep them and raise them out as well. So it's just, an extra little cherry on top of the enterprise to have these free calves, especially now. I was just looking at a livestock report yesterday for our local stock sale, and 2 weight calves are breaking $5 a pound.
Wow.
So these little baby calves are bringing $1,000 a head. So I'm looking at these little jokers now like, ooh, you're some valuable little boys. Now, what helps us on the marketing side is we need about 2 to 3 cows worth of ground beef and roast for every one that we sell is steak. So we don't need to have good quality steak from every beef that's running through our processor. We actually need a lot of ground and roast, which kind of sucks if you're using your high quality finished steers or heifers, that you're trying to get a lot of high quality cuts out of them, and you're like, do we really want to throw all this bottom round and sirloin into ground product? But with old cows, it's a much easier decision to make. That, hey, we bought this old cow for $1.10 a pound. We can put it all into ground beef, and it's still a profitable sale. So that's where we work with our processor on. They evaluate the carcasses when we slaughter. If it's good enough to cut for steak, we'll cut it for steak. But if it's not, it's going to go into roast or whole ground, even for some that never recover body condition. If they just stay skinny their whole time here, straight into ground beef.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like such a, an efficient way to do things. You're offering a nutrient dense product that is, comparable to a lot of stuff that other consumers will find, but you're probably able to do it at a better price point because of the way that you're balancing things out and that you're using a cull herd to do that. So I think that's just really, really smart advice, and a way to do things.
Yeah, it allows us to stay very competitive
Yeah.
on pricing, and also it gives us options that even before we had switched to the pound cow herd, we were only buying heifers. Just to keep that option in front of us. That a steer is a terminal decision. When you get a steer, he ain't doing anything else. But when you get heifers, at least you have options in front of you that if you can't, you don't have the sales to sell all of them at retail, you can do bred heifers, or you can even calve them out and have first calf heifers or whatever. The pound cows was kind of the next iteration of that process. That, hey, this is a very undervalued class of animal that produces a high quality beef. Like, there's this notion that old cows is kind of low quality beef. That's not the case. Like, we graze them for a season in our operation. They're putting on an average of 300 pounds of gain because they're on the best grass that they've probably had in a long time. I would challenge any finishing operation to compare ribeyes on some of the best of these old cows that are coming through. Like, it's really good color, good fat content on the steak. The roast and ground are really delicious. So, and that's something that we're also educating our customer base on. Is it's a very kind of American thing, and pushed by either Cattlemen's Association or the checkoff program or whatever, that the highest quality beef is a 24, 26-month old corn finished steer. That's not the case at all in the rest of the world. If you look in Europe, finishing beef is usually 4 years plus. That they're doing older animals, and even looking into what's called aged beef. So not aged as in like dry aged, but aged as in geriatric beef that have 10, 15 seasons of grazing on them, that have a lot of flavor and texture to them, that's brought from that long exposure and season upon season of grazing. So the idea that a retired cow is somehow kind of a waste product of the beef industry, that's only because we treat them that way. If we would treat these older mother animals, same with sows, that our cull sows as well, built on a lifetime of good management and a good treatment and good feed through a finishing cycle at the end of their life, that meat is on par with the quality of anything else that you would find out there. So I really have an issue with this notion that old animals are somehow a low quality product.
You're bringing an innovative, efficient product to market, and there's so much that you're doing that replicates that. I feel like that is innovative. And we haven't even talked about your poultry operation yet. And for folks who haven't seen the farm tour yet, I hope you go back and watch it after this video, because there's lots of innovation happening on Jordan's farm. So much so that I think we titled the video "The King of DIY Farming," which.
The title has stuck. I've had people come up to me and drop that title, so I'll have to give you credit for that one.
There's lots of innovative DIY design here. Jordan is really good at that.
And it all starts right here with these sea container brooders.
This is really impressive. So let's round it out with your broiler operation. how is that working into your enterprise model? I mean, you got a great farrowing operation. You're doing, pigs for meat as well. You're getting that land impact from your cattle operation. You're pro- marketing beef direct to consumer, and then you got a broiler operation. How does that fit in, and where are you marketing that stuff to?
Yeah, well, it fits in where it's one of the most high demand meats that's out there that sells at a very profitable price point. That once you achieve a little bit of scale and find some ways to be efficient in, it is a slam dunk enterprise to add to a farm. Birds are adding a huge amount of fertility to the pasture that they're on. Something like turkeys, we've been able to utilize in a debugging role where we are free ranging them for the last 6 months of their lives over 10, 12 acre pastures. And they are completely grasshoppering that pasture. It's like a grasshopper death squad that's just on patrol. Broilers, it's hard to use in kind of a symbiotic way where they're utilizing a certain forage or, doing bug control. Their life is so short and they are so lazy that it's about just getting them some fresh grass, keeping them moving along, distributing that manure around and producing a high quality product is more of the goal with them. But we've had a good demand for broilers every year that we've produced them. It's something that has to be a little bit more dialed into what the market wants and what the customers are looking for, though, because there is no commodity safety net underneath it. Worst case scenario with the pound cows, we just load them back up on the trailer and take them to stock sale. Same with the pigs. You sell them on the commodity market. Yeah, you're going to lose your shirt on it, but at least they're not on your farm eating feed anymore. If you've got a couple thousand extra broilers that you don't know what to do with, you're kind of kind of stuck. So we've had to be careful to modulate the growth of that enterprise with what the demand for it is, and be very responsive to that. But it's worked out well. Just from a cash flow standpoint, from a profitability standpoint. Once you have a customer through the door, they're looking for other products, and a lot of customers are looking for chicken, especially now.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a quick cash flowing enterprise. So we see a lot of people getting started with pastured poultry to see if they like farming, to see if it's for them, build up some of that quick cash flow, so that they can then reinvest that money back into their farm and consider other enterprises.
Yeah,
Um,
and that's the attraction of it, is the speed of that capital cycle.
yeah,
There's actually a lot more infrastructure required for broilers than something like pigs, but the seasonality of it, that you can start it in April and be done in September, October, and you are actually done. There is nothing happening. That's certainly a big attraction for people who are dipping their toes in farming.
yeah, and I know one of those infrastructure components, is potentially, processing equipment, especially if you do on-farm processing,
Right.
and you guys do, is that right?
Yeah, about 80% or so of our poultry is processed on farm.
You also teach people how to process their own animals. I know you have a Farrow to Finish school. Will you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, one of the things that we noticed back in 2015, 16 when we started Farm Builder was a lot of people are asking the same questions. How do we produce something in a profitable way? How do we scale a farm? Some things that were not maybe at the time being discussed as much were what is the frame behind all of that? How do we build a profitable enterprise? And what's kind of what's the thing you see on websites, the stats for nerds? What's the nerdy side to building out a farm? That's what we really try to do with Farm Builder, is teach that side of it of, hey, here's why we don't do this. Here's why you should look at doing this. One of the flagships that we've had is a Farrow to Finish in marketing school. So, 3 days of actually looking at what are the foundational elements of building this enterprise from Farrow to finish. So it's not just a on-farm kind of butcher class thing. It's how do you build profitability into this? How do you make an income from doing this enterprise on your farm from start all the way to finish? Laura teaches the last day, which is on marketing, which actually is what makes you the money, transacting with the customers.
About how many spaces do you guys have for the school?
We could probably accommodate 50 or 60. We've started doing it in conjunction with our neighbor's farm that they have an on-farm brewery. So we rent their space out for the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, or Tuesday through Thursday that we do this school. Most of our schools are like in the 30 to 35 range of people who come. So if it's something that folks are looking for, 3 days of kind of intense stuff, like we do castration demonstrations and we get volunteers to try it as well. And I feel bad for those piglets that are the test dummies there. But it's a hands-on experience. We're walking in the woods. We're looking at pigs. We're looking at piglets. We're looking at all aspects of it. So if that's something folks are looking for, definitely come out to the farm and have a little experience.
Is the brewery incorporated in any way?
They do have a bartender there in the evenings. Yes.
All right, I'm sold. I'm there.
There you go.
Well, awesome. That sounds like a fun time. I know that Christine has been to it, and she said it was a phenomenal experience, and she definitely has carried it with her in her journey. If folks want to sign up for it or get more information, where can they go to find out about it?
Pretty much any of our social media platforms, which you can find just by putting in Farm Builder, will have a link to it. If you want to go directly to the website, it's farmbuilder.us.
Yeah, I mean, you're a great teacher. You do a lot of innovative things on your farm. You have the farm school. You have so many DIY projects that are really worth seeing up close and personal. Can you tell us about some of your most recent DIY projects and how they're working out for you?
The big one we've been working on for the last 4.5 years right now is something called the multi-species shelter system. And it starts with asking questions is where innovation begins. And I'm a big fan of the iterative design process. Like I'm a big space nerd. I've loved SpaceX and what they're doing. But that iterative design process is you have a problem, you come up with solutions, and you break it down to the smallest possible step that you can take towards that solution. So we're not trying to solve everything at one time. We're just trying to take one step towards a solution. Two problems that we had. One, during the summer, we need a lot of shelter space for broilers and turkeys. It's a seasonal operation from April to October. We need a lot of roof space. And there's a lot of different kind of poultry shelters that are out there that all of them have their pluses and minuses. The second problem that we had was we need a lot of roof space in the winter for a swine slash herbivore operation. So if you take those two problems, all right, we need a bunch of roof space in the summer on pasture. We need a bunch of roof space in the winter on pasture. Is there some marriage of those two where we don't have all of the broiler shelters sitting empty for 5 months out of the year, and we don't have all of the pig shelters sitting empty for 8 months out of the year? It's just a huge inefficiency. And, when you see thousands of dollars of infrastructure sitting there doing nothing, it's kind of like, ugh. And that's where the concept of, can we have a shelter that can do both? Can it be built portable enough and structured enough for broilers, which is, a baseball size animal when you put them out on pasture, but yet be strong enough to handle a 700-pound sow who needs a place to farrow piglets in the winter? And that's what let us down. In 2020, we built a prototype. So that's kind of the next step of your iterative process is you identify the problem and then you design and develop a prototype. So we built 2 of them in 2020. That it's a off-the-shelf carport system from Shelter Logic is the company. They're one of the few companies that will sell you the carport for you to put it together. Most carport companies have their own crews. They put them together. They don't want you to touch it. But we found them. We can buy this off-the-shelf carport. The first ones that we got were 20 by 20. We designed our own skid to go underneath them, and we started using them for broilers. And then we started using them for pigs in the fall. A lot of times where the temptation to shortcut the process is you do it one time and you're like, oh, this is great. We're going to do all of them this way. And what I found over doing this for 20 plus years is if you got an idea for something, you got to do it for several years before you decide, hey, mass adaptation is what we're going to do here. Otherwise, you could back yourself into a very expensive corner of a problem you didn't see coming for the first couple of years. So we used those 2 initial prototypes for 4 seasons before we decided, all right, this is a viable model. We are going to pull the trigger on spending a big chunk of money to build enough to replace our aging fleet of other shelters. Because it's kind of at that point where, are we going to spend money on fixing up the system that is not ideal for what we need, or is it time to pull the trigger on moving into the future with the new concept? And so last year we built 6 of them. So all of our broilers last year ran in these things, and then we used them over winter for pigs. So it's a building that solves 2 problems. We use it for poultry all during the summer.
Yeah.
When we need extra roof space in the winter, we can use it for anything smaller than a cow. And then our ideas for our Mark III iteration, the third refinement of the model, is something that we could even use for cattle. So that'll be something probably not this year, but probably next year that we'll work on.
Are you thinking like shade or what?
No, for like a winter run-in shed kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yep. Just
Gotcha.
something to get them out. In Virginia, our winters, the harshest conditions we deal with is 35 degrees and rain. That's our nightmare scenario. It's not 50 below with a 70-mile-an-hour wind, or frozen kind of weather. No, it is the muddy, crappy, rainy conditions. So having a place for those herbivores just to get out of the rain is usually the highest priority.
How does that work, with, geography and logistics? If you have your pigs farrowing in the forest or over here on this part of your farm, and you're raising poultry over here on this part, what do you do when it's time to kind of make that transition from
Right.
the
So
middle of the season?
8 months out of the year, our pigs are farrowing in the woods using straw bales, like we showed on the farm tour when you were out here. It's during the winter that we have the alternative farrowing system, where we're actually bringing the pigs out of the woods onto the pasture, because we don't want them finding some pile of trees to farrow in or behind some stump. That's not a good situation in the winter. We want a much more controlled area where she's farrowing, level ground, straw bedding, taking those extra steps to prevent the mortality with the piglets. So we'll actually just bring that set of sows. They're on their rotation through the woods. We bring them up to the edge of the field, and then they just go out into the field where the shelter is.
Gotcha. And then are you still kind of rotating it every so often? Or are you leaving it in place?
It'll be like a wagon wheel system. So you have the shelter at the center, and we can get about 6 paddocks around that, in like a flower petal or pizza slice type of thing.
Gotcha.
And we can move that paddock every 10 days or so. So we can get about 2 months of rotation, and that'll end up being about a 3-acre area, with that building at the center, and then their paddocks are just going around it. And this winter, we used one for a group of about 40 replacement gilts, and we ran paddocks all the way around it, and then we actually moved them to another shelter that we had on the other side of the field, so that they would have new pasture areas, and we just switched the shelter that they were sleeping in.
And of course, you didn't start out with the larger size. You started out, I think you mentioned, and we saw on the tour, with Salatin style chicken tractors. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, we at one point had 50 of those things, and we're moving them every day, and built a bunch of those in our first couple of years, and we're at the point where they are aging out. So you have to decide, all right, we're going to spend the money on fixing these up, or are we just going to build new ones, or this is a nice inflection point where we can either renew our commitment to a production model, or we can throw it in the burn pile and try something else.
Yeah. Well, what other DIY projects do you have on the farm? Anything new or anything that you haven't seen on other farms that you might want to share?
So there's a bunch of stuff like you saw that we've done with sow drinkers, with different kinds of IBC feeders. I'm a huge fan of IBCs, and the totes, they're just a wonderful waste product, right? So one area that I'm kind of in that planning cycle, there's no concepts really out there, is using some type of IBC with a solar operated vacuum pump for my new hobby, which is black walnut syrup production. Like we just wrapped up our season yesterday, which was a 5-week sprint, but I've got a lot of ideas for that. And idea I'm toying with is like a walnut management type of service that we offer to landowners, because walnut syrup is very valuable. Walnut timber is very valuable. Now, how do we just design little systems that could make that work? So that's my side quest. More of a farm application is I really want to crack the nut on an IBC tank farrowing shelter. So we have a farrowing shelter system that I designed and built that it works fine, but it's just not as simple as I would want it to be. That's a big thing for me, is simplicity to designs, easily replicated, and not a huge deal when it gets destroyed. The farrowing shelters that we have now, they've worked fine, but they're made out of wood. Wood ages, wood rots, screws get loose. You got to baby them as they go. And so, yeah, it's something I've been pondering for a while now, is how am I going to take these IBC totes and make a farrowing shelter that works for the piglets and works for the sows and works for us, out there taking care of them. So that's what I'm pondering in my spare moments at the moment.
Yeah, and you mentioned the black walnut syrup. I think that was such an interesting thing to see. I'd never even heard of black walnut syrup until I visited your farm. And of course, as soon as I got home, I ordered three bottles of it, and just loving it so much. It's delicious. It's smoky. It's thick. It's creamy. It's
Yeah.
awesome. If you guys should all go and buy a bottle right now because it's in limited supply. It's really something special. So, um,
It's a very niche product. It has that kind of unique factor to it that people are willing to pay for. I have not done the numbers yet, but average sap production is probably half a gallon of sap per tree per day, or per tap. So it's nothing like maple. It's a very different tree, very different process. But it's been a lot of fun to learn. It's something that different to do in the winter, and standing around a fire in February is a lot more fun than standing around a hot fire in the summer. And we've sold out every year we've done it. Now we're doing it at a very small scale. We
yeah.
produced about a little over 30 gallons this year, so almost doubled our production from last year. But as a farm, if you have black walnuts, a lot of farmers treat it like a weed. They're like trying to cut these things down and get rid of them, because they're growing in fences and growing around the barn and raining nuts on the house. And again, it is a undervalued resource that has a very overvalued value for people who are willing to put the work into it. And that's what I like about it. It tastes delicious, and it retails for $700 a gallon. So that's great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's one of those, I think I told you that, I think it's such a special, unique product that I gifted a jar of it to my mother-in-law. That's how good I thought it was.
Nice.
Well, awesome. Well, I know another DIY project that you have on your farm that's fascinating is your sea container brooders that you built. Tell us a little bit about those and where they kind of what's the stand process for those today. Are you still using them?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I have zero regrets about the sea container brooders. They have been awesome. If you look at brooding poultry, there's some problems that everybody has. A big one is predators, right? Rats love to get in your brooder and cause mayhem. Little ferrets, weasels, whatever. Everything loves chicken, right? We love chicken. All predators love chicken, and so that's one factor to consider. You have to make a really bulletproof type of building. Another big thing is draft control. Having air currents moving around in your brooder is a bad thing. And that's another strike against using existing buildings or old barns. It's just hard to control the amount of air that's coming through and have kind of those precise temperature and humidity controls. Third thing was, when we built all of them, we're operating on leased property. So we don't want to spend a bunch of money on infrastructure that we can't take with us if we leave. Again, using that iterative process of, all right, what's something that we could brood in that is cost effective, that if it doesn't work, we could do something else with it. And I just had a connection at the time with a guy who could get these sea containers pretty cheap. So we're paying like $3,400, I think, for the sea container and the chassis it was sitting on. We're like, great, we can get into brooding poultry for $5,000-6,000 and see if this works. So we got the first one, built it out, used it for a couple of years, because our broiler production was at a level where we could do that. And it solved 90% of those problems. It presented a few problems unique to how they are, that is how the iterative process works. You solve a big problem, a couple small problems pop up, and then you have to figure out how to solve those. But we liked it so much that we have 3 of them now, and that's what we're processing or brooding our poultry in. a guy who years ago, I'm forgetting his name right now, but I think he even hired me to do some remote consulting because he wanted to get into these sea container brooders. And just a couple months ago, I heard from him that he's got 9 of these things going now. So,
Wow.
he's really scaled it out. But they're great in that they're airtight. You can keep predators out. You can control airflow through them. You can control daylight if you're into controlling that with your birds. And if it doesn't work out that we got to shut the chicken operation down one day, we can resell them. We can use
Yeah.
them for storage space. If we ever have to leave that farm, we can put all of our stuff in those sea containers and just hire guys with tractors, trailerless tractors to hook up to them and pull them wherever we need them to go. So I'm a huge fan of them for, kind of that small mid-scale type of brooding. If we were doing a couple 100,000 birds a year, like some farms are, yeah, it's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
It just starts becoming inefficient there. But if you're trying to brood somewhere between 400 and 800 birds at a time,
Mhm.
sea containers are awesome.
Per sea container, right?
Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
we run broilers at 750 per sea container, and turkeys we will start 500 in there.
And do you think it would work in a variety of climate contexts? Or, I mean, I know, like you said, in Virginia, you have fairly mild seasons. Is it unique to that, or would it work in hotter, colder climates?
So I've heard feedback from people who are using them from the deep south all the way to the north, and you certainly have to build the unit out to your local context. For us, we're a little bit on both ends that we have to be able to accommodate for cold weather. Like we'll get 25-degree nights during our broiler season and hot weather. We'll get 100-degree days. So we have to have both the ability to add surplus heat. So we've designed them basically, we can put a third heat light in them and we'll just use deeper bedding for our spring cycle. Or in the summer, when we get those 100-degree days, what's worked for us is just putting drip irrigation hose, like you can get at Lowe's, like those drip lines for your garden. We just have those zigzagged on the top of the sea containers, and if it's going to be above 90 degrees, we just automatically turn them on, and we have evaporative cooling off the top of the container. Certainly, if heat is a continual issue, if you were in Texas or somewhere, probably having them underneath some kind of shed would really help, or having some kind of shade cloth pulled across the top. In addition to evaporative cooling. But for somewhere up in the north, guys are using insulated sea containers, or they are figuring out ways to insulate the one that they have. So yeah, that's tailoring an iteration to a unique context is absolutely essential. That you see this in other livestock enterprises as well, that someone from up north visits a ranch in Texas and they're like, well, I'm going to ranch cattle like these guys are in Texas, and it doesn't work at all up there. Or big thing here in Virginia is farms trying to crack the nut on grazing 365 days out of the year, and they see operations that are doing it in colder climates where the ground freezes in the fall, kind of arid and dry, so that forage stays standing up and nice and frosty, and they can graze cattle the whole winter there. It doesn't work as well here in Virginia because we have 35 degrees and rain, so that grass flops over, gets trodden into the ground, and starts deteriorating pretty quick. It's just a different context in different parts of the country, and you've got to contextualize any design to what works on your specific farm.
Yeah, we hear that from pretty much every farm, that we've visited and farmer that we talk with, is you got to do what works right for you, apply it to your context, and your market opportunities, what you're good at. So I think that's just sound advice. So you've grown your farm into $1 million in revenue. You have multiple enterprises, lots going on the farm. I know you and the family work on it round the clock. Who else do you guys have helping you on a day-to-day basis run your operation?
So yeah, we've definitely got people who are helping us. You don't build a business, a growing business, without bringing people onto the team. One of the things we did, let's say 8 years ago, was divide the business into 2 departments. Essentially, that we have the operational side, and then we have everything after the animals leave on a trailer, side. So the order fulfillment, the marketing, customer interaction, working with that side. And that's Laura manages that side. I manage the operations side. So on her side, she has a lady that works with her pretty much full time now that is remote. Like she lives like an hour away, and she's just working on website stuff, copy, email, Google Analytics, that cerebral type of activities. Laura is there full time. Usually, Laura will also have a part-time to full-time assistant on order fulfillment, moving stuff to and from cold storage, delivering wholesale orders, that kind of stuff. So 2 to 3 people on that side of the business. On the operations side, there's myself and usually, let's say, 2 to 4 other people, depending on the season, depending who just left, who we just hired. It's a fluid, dynamic environment for sure. But my 16-year-old son is involved on the weekends some, probably for the summer he'll be working for us. I've got some guys that just will work weekends because they got full-time jobs through the week, so they come in on the weekends to do stuff. So let's say 2 to 4 people on my side. And then we have our butcher team, which is just for poultry processing. And that is a collection of 14 to 19-year-old homeschoolers that the word has gotten out in the homeschool groups that we are the employer of most compensation in the area for homeschool kids. So they are kind of coming out of the woodwork here the last couple of years that, their friend got hired and told them, hey, I'm making pretty good money butchering chickens over here. So that is going to be 5 to 9 people that we will have on that roster. And Laura usually builds out that schedule of these are our processing dates, which days they can kind of fit in. And then we just have 1 or 2 key people from, either Laura has managed the processing team or someone from the operational side that will be the adult in charge of what's going on, working with these kids on the processing side. So all of that being said, some days it's only 2 people on the farm. Other days it's like 15 people. It just depends on the day and what's going on.
Yeah, it definitely, takes a team, especially when you scale it to a good size. When you were first starting out, did you and Laura both work full time on the farm, or did somebody have an off farm job?
No, we were full time from day one. So when I left the Marine Corps, Laura was working in banking. This was the summer of 2009, the height of the financial crisis. People to our face told us it was a stupid thing that we were doing, but we were in it full time from day one. It's been our full time occupation since then. The first couple of years, I think we worked the first 2 years straight, every day, trying to build a business, because you have so much when you're starting a farm that usually you're not stepping into an operation that has the adequate infrastructure set or the operational attitude or the marketing in place at all. So you're simultaneously building all 3 aspects, and trying not to destroy yourself. And, it ends up meaning a lot of work. But as it goes, you can, start taking days off and add people to your team because you might have some money to actually do that. But it has been, this is our full-time deal. Farm Builder does a little bit on the side. Laura does a little consulting and coaching on the side, but that is just a fraction of a couple percent of what we do. The farm is our main deal.
Yeah. Well, what's on the horizon for you guys? What's in the future for J&L Green Farm?
If I had that crystal ball, man, I would have put it all in on Bitcoin in 2012. We've had a really strong growth in drop shipping in the last year, let's say. It's something we've had in place even before COVID. COVID gave us a big pop in that area. But even here in the last couple of months, it's something that we've had conversations of like, man, this shipping thing is really picking up. The last couple of years, we have really been acknowledging the fact that we need some kind of order fulfillment center. And that's kind of what's on the agenda for this year, is building out a space as an order fulfillment center so we can get that off the farm and somewhere that's definitely a lot more room space to work with, bigger freezers, all of that. And we're finding out how many hundreds of thousands of dollars that's going to actually cost to do. So that's kind of one thing that's on there. At a, let's say a big picture level, I think collaboration is what we're really trying to work towards. Is we don't need to be managing thousands of acres and managing hundreds of head of cattle and all these other things. If we can establish that we are a brand that is trusted and respected, that has proper protocols in place and, et cetera, good order fulfillment, customer care. Well, not every other farm around us needs to have that as well if they want to participate in a direct to retail kind of thing. And we're really working on developing collaborative relationships with other producers around us to add complementary products to what we're already producing, or maybe even start producing some beef for us underneath the protocols that we have. There's a lot of cattle farmers around us, and they don't want to give up their land or their cows to us, but maybe they'll work with us and we just buy their cattle. So
Yeah.
that's conversations that we're having is, what does that next level look like? Because we're not looking to work another 10 hours a day. So that means expanding that team beyond just the people who work for J&L Green Farm. Like what can we use this business for in the next ring of community that's around us to provide opportunity for other producers?
Yeah, I've seen that progression at other places. I think after I left your farm, I was able to tour with Jamie Yeager's farm in Asheville, North Carolina, and Hickory Nut Gap Meats, and that's I think what they progressed to is something like that, where they have the systems in place, and then they had the brand and the marketing, and so they work with other farmers to help procure high quality products, so that they're, like you said, not working another 10, 20 hours a week to try to grow that much product themselves.
Yeah, not everyone wants to market, and that's fine. If you look at what the crisis for American farmers today is, it's not not necessarily that there's a failure of having commodity producers per se who are producing for distributors who are selling the product. It's that the farmer is getting such a small percentage of the retail dollar, and
Yeah.
being denied market access and bottlenecks and gatekeeping and all these other issues. But there's nothing inherently wrong with a farm that just wants to engage in production. They don't want to interface with the customers and have people on the farm all the time. And a farm can be a reflection of the owners. And just because someone prefers the company of cattle and John Deere's to people doesn't mean that's a bad life decision. It just means that's who they are. And can we be part of a small piece of solving that problem for the American farmers? Not all of us need to market directly to retail, but farmers need to be well compensated for what they're producing and have a stable platform to exist on.
Well, Jordan, thank you so much for your time. This is such a wealth of information and such a great conversation. I always enjoy hanging out with you. So really appreciate it. If you guys haven't seen the tour of J&L Green Farm, we're going to link it right here for you guys to watch. You should definitely check it out. There's lots of great stuff. We've been showing B-roll of it throughout this video. And go click on that video next. Subscribe to our channel, where we're going to have more conversations just like this with other farmers, more farm tours, and lots of helpful information to help you in your regenerative farming journey. So with that, Jordan, I just want to say thanks again so much.
All right. Thank you, Tyler. Been great hanging out with you.
All right. Take care.